The last recording. The tape recorder clicks on with a sound like a rifle bolt sliding home. Static hisses through the speakers for 3 seconds before a voice emerges, weathered and rough as old leather. This is Captain James Hartwell, 707th Tank Battalion, recording on December 16th, 1994. 50 years to the day, my grandson asked me to tell him about the war before the cancer takes what's left of me. I never spoke about Bastogne. Not to Sarah before she passed, not to my kids, but maybe it's time. The old man pauses. In the background, a clock ticks, the same sound that ticked in frozen Belgian forests half a century ago. This is the story of Resolute, my Sherman tank, and the 4 boys who crewed her through 10 days of frozen hell. Only 3 of us made it home, and for 50 years I've asked myself, did I make the right calls? Could I have saved him? Another pause, longer this time. The weight of 5 decades pressing down on every word. I guess you'll be the judge of that, son. Let me take you back to December 15th, 1944. The tape crackles, time shifts, and the story begins. December 15th, 1944. 10 o'clock at night. The Ardennes Forest squatted dark and silent under a sky heavy with snow. Moonlight struggled through the canopy, casting skeletal shadows across frozen ground. The temperature had dropped to 15 degrees below zero, cold enough to freeze oil, cold enough to freeze blood. Inside the M403 Sherman tank designated Resolute, 5 men huddled against the cold. The tank sat dark and silent among the trees, one of 32 Shermans scattered across a 24-kilometer front. The 28th Infantry Division held this sector. They called it a rest area. They called it quiet. They were wrong on both counts. Captain James Hartwell sat in the commander's position, his body wedged into the turret, a wool blanket wrapped around his shoulders. At 32 years old, he'd already lived 3 lifetimes. North Africa had aged him. Sicily had hollowed him out. Now the Ardennes would finish the job, though he didn't know it yet. His hands worked automatically, winding a pocket watch. The inscription on the back read, "Time heals all wounds. Bring it home." His father had pressed it into his palm the day he shipped out to North Africa. That felt like 100 years ago. The watch had survived Tunisia, Kasserine Pass, Sicily, and the long push across France. The old man had carried it through the trenches of the Great War. Now it ticked in the freezing darkness of Belgium, counting down the hours until hell opened up. Hartwell checked the time. 2,200 hours. 2 hours until his watch ended. 2 hours until he could close his eyes and pretend to sleep. He never really slept anymore, not since Morrison. 8 days ago, Lieutenant Richard Morrison had commanded the Sherman tank Defiant, positioned 300 meters to Hartwell's left. Morrison was 25 years old, fresh from Fort Knox, engaged to a girl in Ohio. He had a photo of her tucked into his tanker's helmet. Her name was Catherine. The Tiger tank had come out of nowhere. One moment, Morrison's voice crackled over the radio, calm and professional. The next moment, an 88mm shell punched through Defiant's frontal armor like paper. The Sherman brewed up instantly. Ammunition cooked off. Flames shot 30 feet into the air. Morrison got the hatch open. Hartwell watched through his periscope as the young officer dragged himself out, uniform on fire. He made it 3 feet before collapsing. The screams lasted 14 seconds. Hartwell counted every one. They pulled what was left of Morrison out of the wreckage 2 hours later. There wasn't enough to send home. They buried him in a field outside of a town whose name Hartwell could never remember. No one ever found Catherine's photo. It burned with everything else. Now, 8 days later, Hartwell still heard those screams. They echoed in every quiet moment. They followed him into the few hours of restless sleep he managed to steal. They whispered that he should have seen the tiger first, should have warned Morrison, should have done something, anything to save that kid. The weight of command settled heavier with each passing day. Below him in the turret, Sergeant Michael O'Brien worked on the 75mm gun's breech mechanism by the light of a red-filtered flashlight. Mac was 24 years old, Boston Irish, with the kind of face that looked like it had been carved from granite. Before the war, he'd worked as a mechanic at the Detroit Arsenal, assembling the very tanks he now served in. He understood machinery the way other men understood family. Every gear, every bearing, every tolerance had meaning. Mac's hands moved with surgical precision as he adjusted the recoil mechanism. His breath came out in white clouds. In the dim light, Hartwell could see a photograph taped to the turret wall above Mac's position. Margaret O'Brien, 7 months pregnant, smiled out from the creased image. Mac had received the letter 3 weeks ago. His wife was due in February. He'd never met his child, might never meet his child if the war kept grinding on. "Mac, you're going to wear out that breech block," Hartwell said quietly. The gunner didn't look up. "At -15 Celsius, Captain, muzzle velocity drops 3%. We need to compensate. Adjust elevation by 0.7 mils at 1,000 meters, 0.3 mils at 500. "You calculated that in your head?" "Did it yesterday and the day before. I keep calculating it, hoping the numbers change. They don't." Hartwell said nothing. Mac's obsession with precision had kept them alive more than once. In a tank battle, the difference between a hit and a miss often came down to fractions of a degree. Mac understood this in his bones. The Sherman M4A3 was not a perfect machine. 51 millimeters of frontal armor, barely enough to stop a determined rifle round, let alone a German 75 millimeter armor-piercing shell. The main gun, a 75 millimeter M3, had a short barrel, 3 meters long, low muzzle velocity, weak penetrating power. Against German Panthers and Tigers, the Sherman was outgunned and out-armored. American tank crews called Shermans Ronsons, after the cigarette lighter. Lights first time, every time. The British called them Tommy Cookers. 5 men inside, 4.7 seconds from penetration to fatal fire. Those were the statistics. Those were the numbers that men like Mac calculated in the frozen darkness. But the Sherman had one advantage. It was reliable. The Ford GA8 engine produced 500 horsepower. In perfect conditions, on flat ground, with fresh oil and good fuel, it could push the 30-ton tank to 30 miles per hour. It could run for 100 miles without breaking down. It could take punishment and keep rolling. That reliability had saved Hartwell's crew more times than he could count. And right now, Resolute carried 71 rounds of main gun ammunition, 63 armor-piercing, 8 high-explosive. Eddie had counted them twice during the night, his ritual for keeping busy hands from worrying minds. In the driver's position, Corporal Robert Chen sat hunched over a letter, writing by the light of a small pen light. Bobby was 21 years old, born in San Francisco to parents who'd immigrated from Guangdong province in 1920. He'd been studying engineering at MIT when Pearl Harbor was bombed. He'd enlisted the next day. 3 months later, Executive Order 9066 forced his family into Manzanar internment camp. His parents, his 15-year-old sister, his grandparents, all of them locked behind barbed wire in the California desert. American citizens imprisoned by their own government. Bobby never talked about it. He kept a photograph of his sister tucked behind the driver's instrument panel, a small girl with pigtails standing in front of a guard tower, her expression carefully neutral. Bobby looked at that photo every morning. Then he climbed into his tank and drove into whatever hell the day had prepared. The letter he wrote now was in Chinese characters. He never let anyone read them. Privacy was the last luxury a tank crew possessed. Hartwell watched the young driver work and wondered what burden of proof Bobby carried. What loyalty did a man owe to a country that imprisoned his family? Yet here Bobby sat in a frozen forest in Belgium, preparing to fight enemies he'd never met for people who viewed him with suspicion. The contradictions seemed unbearable, yet Bobby bore it without complaint. In the loader's position, Private Eddie Martinez knelt with a rosary in his hands, whispering prayers in Spanish. Eddie was 19 years old, the youngest of the crew. He came from a small town outside San Antonio, Texas. Mexican-American, Catholic, devout in a way that seemed impossible given what they'd seen. Eddie had volunteered the day after Pearl Harbor. His father tried to stop him. His mother blessed him and told him God would protect him. Eddie believed her. He believed it with a faith that seemed bulletproof. Now he carved a small wooden cross from a shell crate, his fingers working the wood with the same precision Mac applied to gun mechanisms. Eddie's faith was his armor. "God's bullet hasn't been made yet," he told Hartwell once. The captain envied that certainty. Eddie was also the fastest loader in the battalion, 6 seconds from breech open to round loaded to breech closed. In combat, where fractions of a second meant life or death, Eddie's speed had saved them all. His hands never shook, his rhythm never faltered. Load, close, fire. Load, close, fire. A mechanical prayer repeated until the enemy was destroyed, or they were. In the bow gunner position, Private Thomas Reed cleaned his .30 caliber machine gun for the 3rd time that night. Tommy was 20 years old from a hardscrabble farm in eastern Kentucky. He'd grown up hunting squirrels and rabbits to put food on the table. Poverty had driven him to the army. The army had made him a soldier. Tommy had the kind of optimism that seemed immune to reality. He smiled more than any man in a combat zone had a right to. He told jokes. He hummed songs. Right now, he hummed, "I'll be home for Christmas," his voice soft and slightly off-key. "Hey, Captain," Tommy said without looking up from his gun. "You think we'll be home for New Year's?" "I promised my kid brother I'd teach him to shoot rabbits. He's 12 now, probably thinks I forgot about him." Hartwell looked at the young soldier. Tommy kept a photograph in his breast pocket. Two boys standing in front of a weathered farmhouse. The older one had his arm around the younger. Both were grinning. That photo had survived 3 countries and a dozen firefights. "We'll make it home," Hartwell said. The lie came easily now. He'd told it so many times he almost believed it himself. Tommy nodded and went back to humming. The sound filled the cramped interior of the tank. For a moment, the war seemed far away. But Hartwell knew better. He'd learned in North Africa that war was never far away. It waited in the darkness. It hid behind the next hill. It wore 1,000 faces and spoke a dozen languages, but its message was always the same. Death comes for everyone. The only question is when. The captain pulled out a letter of his own. The paper was worn soft from repeated readings. Sarah's handwriting, neat and precise, covered both sides. The letter was dated November 20th, nearly a month old, the most recent he'd received. She wrote about the pregnancy, about the doctor's visits, about the baby's room they were preparing in their small house outside Harrisburg, Pennsylvania. She wrote about neighbors who asked about him, about the victory garden she was tending, about how much she missed him. But Sarah's letters had stopped 2 weeks ago. The mail system was unreliable. Everyone knew that. Delays were common. There were 100 innocent explanations. Yet dread sat in Hartwell's gut like a stone. The due date was January 10th, 3 weeks away. Complications happened. Women died in childbirth. Babies died. And here he sat, 2,000 miles away, unable to help, unable to even know if something had gone wrong. He folded the letter carefully and tucked it back into his pocket, next to the watch. 2 talismans against the darkness. 2 promises that life existed beyond this frozen hell. "Listen up," Hartwell said quietly. 4 heads turned. The crew knew that tone. Something was coming. "I don't care what happens tomorrow," the captain continued. "We stick together, we watch each other's backs, and we all go home. All 5 of us. That's not a suggestion. That's an order." Mac looked up from the gun mechanism. "Yes, sir." Bobby folded his letter. "Understood, Captain." Eddie pocketed his rosary. "We'll make it, sir. I can feel it." Tommy grinned. "Home by New Year's. I'll hold you to that, Captain." Hartwell nodded. "Good, now get some sleep. I'll take first watch." The crew settled into their positions as best they could. Sleep in a tank was never comfortable. The steel was too cold, the space was too cramped. But exhaustion was a powerful sedative. Within minutes, the sound of breathing deepened. 4 men finding whatever rest they could. Hartwell remained in the commander's position, his eyes scanning the darkness beyond the tank. Intelligence reported that German activity had decreased over the past week. The enemy was spent, they said, exhausted from their retreat across France. The war would be over by Christmas, they said. Hartwell had heard that before. He'd heard it in North Africa. He'd heard it in Sicily. He'd heard it in France. The war was always almost over. Victory was always just around the corner, and men kept dying by the thousands. But tonight felt different. The forest was too quiet. The radio had crackled with scattered reports of increased German transmissions. Recon patrols reported movement. Nothing concrete, nothing actionable, just shadows and whispers. Hartwell wound the pocket watch and listened to it tick, each second bringing them closer to whatever tomorrow held. He thought about Sarah, about the baby he might never meet, about Tommy's kid brother waiting for rabbit hunting lessons, about Mac's wife 7 months pregnant in Boston, about Bobby's sister behind barbed wire in California, about Eddie's mother praying her rosary in Texas. 5 men in a steel box, 5 lives that depended on the decisions Hartwell made, 5 families waiting for letters, 5 names that might end up carved on white crosses in Belgian soil. The weight of it pressed down like the winter cold, inescapable, crushing. Time heals all wounds, the watch inscription promised. Hartwell wondered if that was true or if some wounds ran too deep for time to touch. At 0530 hours, he got his answer. December 16th, 0530 hours. The first shell arrived without warning. One moment, the forest stood silent in pre-dawn darkness. The next, the world exploded. The tree line erupted in fire. The ground shook. The concussion wave hit Resolute like a physical blow, rocking the 30-ton tank on its suspension. Hartwell's training took over before conscious thought. Move, move, move. He dropped into the turret and grabbed the radio handset. All stations, this is Resolute. We are under artillery attack. Sound off. The radio crackled with chaos, multiple voices shouting over each other, explosions drowning out words, static and screaming. Mac was already at the gun, his hands moving with practiced efficiency. Eddie threw off his blanket and positioned himself at the loader's station. Bobby scrambled into the driver's seat. Tommy swung the bowgun toward the perimeter. Bobby, start her up, Hartwell ordered. The driver hit the starter. The engine turned over once, twice. Nothing. The oil had frozen during the night. The pistons wouldn't move. Again, Hartwell commanded. Bobby tried. The starter motor whined. The engine refused to catch. Outside, artillery shells walked through the forest. Each explosion crept closer. Hartwell could hear trees cracking, could smell the sharp tang of high explosive, could feel the heat of detonations through the tank's steel skin. She's frozen solid, Captain, Bobby said. His voice stayed calm, but his hands shook on the controls. We need at least 10 minutes to heat the oil. We don't have 10 minutes. Hartwell's mind raced through options. Standard procedure said drain the oil, heat it with blowtorches, refill, and start. 20 minutes minimum. But they didn't have 20 minutes. They might not have 2 minutes. Mac, if we torch the oil pan, what's the risk? Hartwell asked. Fuel tank sits right above it, Mac said without hesitation. Direct flame, confined space, fumes from the tank. 50% chance the whole thing goes up. And if we sit here, 100% chance we get bracketed by artillery. Your call, Captain. The shells were getting closer. Hartwell could see flashes through the periscope, could hear the whine of incoming rounds, could hear men screaming on the radio. This was the calculus of command. Risk certain death or probable death. Choose wrong and 5 men died. Choose right and maybe, just maybe, they survived another day. Bobby, flood the carburetor with ether, Hartwell said. His voice sounded calmer than he felt. Mac, Tommy, push the starter for 10 seconds. Pause 5. Repeat. Eddie, say your prayer. Eddie's lips moved silently. His right hand touched the small wooden cross hanging around his neck. Bobby cracked open the ether can and poured it into the carburetor intake. The sharp chemical smell filled the crew compartment. One spark and they'd all be vapor. Now, Hartwell said. Bobby hit the starter. The motor ground. The engine coughed. Died. Again. The starter whined. The engine turned over, sputtered, died. An artillery shell hit 30 meters away. The explosion showered Resolute with dirt and shrapnel. Something pinged off the turret. The tank rocked. One more time, Hartwell said quietly. Bobby pressed the starter. The engine coughed, caught, coughed again, and then roared to life. The sound was beautiful. 500 horses screaming defiance at the frozen dawn. Bobby revved it twice, forcing oil through frozen passages. The engine temperature gauge climbed from dead cold toward operational range. We're up, Bobby said. Give me 30 seconds to warm her and we can move. Those 30 seconds stretched like hours. Shells continued to fall. The radio babbled with fragmentary reports. German breakthrough. Multiple contact points. Panzers rolling through the line. Retreat. Fall back. Every unit for itself. Then a voice cut through the chaos. Calm, professional, American accent. All units, withdraw to grid Echo 7. German breakthrough at multiple points. Fall back to secondary line. Acknowledge. Hartwell grabbed his map case. His finger traced the grid coordinates. Echo 7, the fallback position. Except something was wrong. Mac, did you catch that transmission? Hartwell asked. Yes, sir. Sounded like Colonel Benson. Hartwell's gut twisted. The voice was right. The call signs were right. Even the phonetic alphabet was correct. But one word was wrong. Echo. American tankers didn't use Echo. They used Easy. NATO phonetic versus U.S. military slang. A tiny difference. One that no one would notice unless they were listening for it. Hartwell had made that exact mistake in North Africa. He'd been green then, fresh from training. A captured radio operator had transmitted false orders using the correct call signs, but the wrong phonetics. 3 Shermans followed the orders. All 3 drove into an ambush. 15 men died. Hartwell learned that day to trust his instincts over his ears. "That's not Colonel Benson," Hartwell said. "That's German intelligence reading from a captured codebook." Mac's head snapped up. "How do you know?" "Because I fell for this trick once. Never again." Hartwell ripped the radio handset from its mounting and threw it against the turret wall. The plastic casing shattered. The microphone broke free. The transmission cut off mid-word. The transmitter was destroyed, but Hartwell could see the receiver circuit still glowing faintly. The radio could hear, but no longer speak. "Sir, what are you doing?" Bobby's voice rose an octave. "Going silent," Hartwell said. "We trust no transmissions. The transmitter is destroyed. We can still receive, but we can't send. We operate independently. We find our battalion by dead reckoning." "But Captain, if that was real," Mac started, "then we're disobeying a lawful order, and I'll face a court-martial." Hartwell's tone left no room for argument. "But if it's fake, following it gets us killed. I choose the court-martial." The crew exchanged glances. Then Mac nodded. "I'm with you, sir." "So am I," Bobby said. Eddie and Tommy echoed agreement. "Good," Hartwell said. "Bobby, plot a course northwest. Battalion HQ should be approximately 3 kilometers in that direction. Stay off the main roads. Use the forest trails. Mac, load armor piercing. Tommy, keep that bowgun ready. Everyone stays alert. We move in 60 seconds. Outside, the artillery barrage continued. The German attack had begun. Somewhere in the chaos, the front line was collapsing. American units were being overrun, men were dying, and Resolute sat alone in the forest, cut off from command, operating blind. But they were alive. The engine ran. The gun worked. And Hartwell had a crew he trusted with his life. That would have to be enough. Bobby put the tank in gear. The transmission engaged with a metallic clunk. The tracks bit into frozen ground. Resolute lurched forward, crashing through underbrush, heading into the unknown. Behind them, their bivouac area disappeared in a curtain of artillery fire. If they'd stayed even 2 more minutes, they'd be dead. The ether gamble had paid off. But Hartwell knew their luck wouldn't last forever. Luck never did. The forest trail wound through dense pine trees, the branches heavy with snow. Bobby navigated carefully, avoiding deadfalls and ditches. The Sherman suspension groaned over roots and rocks. The engine temperature finally reached normal operating range. They had mobility, they had firepower, but they had no idea what they were driving into. Hartwell stood in the commander's hatch, his head and shoulders exposed to the freezing air. The cold bit through his tanker's jacket, but he needed to see. Periscopes gave limited fields of view. In a fluid combat situation, limited vision meant death. The artillery barrage had moved east, following what Hartwell assumed was the American retreat. If the fake radio transmission was designed to channel units into a killing zone, then heading northwest away from the ordered retreat might buy them time. Or it might drive them deeper behind German lines. Either way, they'd know soon enough. Movement ahead. Hartwell's hand dropped to the turret top. "Contact front. Bobby, stop." The Sherman lurched to a halt. Through the trees, Hartwell could make out shapes moving on the road. Civilians. Dozens of them, refugees fleeing the battle. They moved in a ragged column, carrying whatever possessions they could. Old men, women, children. The tide of war sweeping the innocent before it. "Bobby, left track forward, right track neutral. Swing us around them," Hartwell ordered. As they maneuvered, an old woman broke from the column and stumbled toward the tank. She shouted in French, her voice high and panicked. Hartwell's French was limited, but he caught enough. Germans, panzers, shooting, husband dead. Behind her, a small girl appeared, maybe 8 years old, blonde hair matted with dirt, face blank with shock. She clutched a teddy bear to her chest and stared up at Hartwell with eyes that had seen too much. The woman grabbed Hartwell's jacket. "Less panzers," she repeated. "Please, my granddaughter, take her, save her." Hartwell looked at the girl, looked at the desperation in the old woman's face, looked at his crew waiting for orders. Every regulation said no. Civilians in combat vehicles. Absolutely forbidden. Liability, safety, chain of command, all the rules that made sense in garrison and meant nothing in the field. "Bobby, can she fit in your compartment?" Hartwell asked. A pause, then, "It's against regs, sir." "I didn't ask about regulations." Another pause. "She'll fit." "Get her in." Tommy opened the bow hatch. The old woman lifted the girl, who moved like a sleepwalker. Tommy took her carefully, guiding her down into the cramped driver's compartment. The girl said nothing. She simply sat where they placed her, teddy bear clutched tight. The old woman pressed something into Hartwell's hand, a wooden cross on a leather cord. She spoke rapidly in French. Blessing, prayer, gratitude. Then she turned and hurried back to the refugee column. Hartwell watched them disappear into the forest. Then he looked at the cross. Then at the small blonde girl now sitting in Bobby's lap, staring at nothing. "What's your name?" Hartwell asked in his broken French. The girl didn't respond. Tommy tried. Bobby tried. She remained silent. "Call her Marie," Eddie said softly. "After the Virgin Mary, she'll need all the protection she can get." "Marie it is," Hartwell agreed. "All right, let's keep moving. We've got a battalion to find." But even as Resolute rumbled forward, Hartwell knew they'd crossed a line. They were responsible for her now. 5 men and 1 small girl in a steel box, driving into a German offensive. If they died, she died. If they survived, they had to get her to safety. Another weight added to the burden of command. Another soul depending on decisions Hartwell prayed he'd make correctly. The forest opened into a narrow valley. Bobby followed a logging trail that paralleled the main road. Through gaps in the trees, Hartwell could see the road itself, empty, eerily so. Where were the American retreat columns? Where was the traffic of war? Then he saw the first body. An American soldier lay face down in the snow, his rifle beside him. Then another, and another. An entire squad cut down where they stood. No obvious wounds, no blood in the snow. "Machine gun fire," Mac observed, peering through his gun sight. "Caught them in the open." Hartwell scanned the tree line. Nothing moved. Whoever did this was long gone. But the message was clear. The Germans had broken through completely. American units were scattered. The front line had ceased to exist. "Bobby, stay off that road," Hartwell said. "Parallel it at 100 meters. Use the trees for cover." They continued northwest, navigating by compass and dead reckoning. The sun rose slowly, painting the snow a sickly yellow. The temperature remained brutally cold. In the distance, the sound of artillery continued. Closer now, the occasional stutter of machine gun fire. Then they found the other tanks. 2 Shermans sat in a clearing ahead. Hartwell recognized them immediately, Fury and Avenger. Lieutenant Parker's and Lieutenant Davidson's tanks. Both were supposed to be part of their platoon. Both were supposed to be 300 meters to Resolute's right in the defensive line. Now they sat motionless in the snow. Hartwell keyed his throat mic. "Parker, Davidson, this is Hartwell. Respond." Nothing but static. Bobby approached slow. "Mac, traverse left. Watch those trees." Resolute crept forward. As they got closer, Hartwell could see Avenger's track. Broken, links scattered across the snow. The tank had thrown a track and become immobile. And Davidson's crew had paid the price. The Sherman sat at an angle, the hull blackened by fire. The hatches stood open. Hartwell knew what that meant before he looked inside. "Bobby, stop here. I'm dismounting." "Captain, let me go." Max said, "You need to stay with the tank." "Negative, I'm going. Cover me." Hartwell climbed out of the turret and dropped to the ground. His boots crunched in the snow. The cold hit him like a fist. He approached Avenger with his pistol drawn, though he knew it was pointless. The dead didn't need shooting. The smell hit him first. Burned meat, burned oil, burned rubber. The smell that haunted every tanker's nightmares. He climbed onto the hull and looked through the commander's hatch. All 5 crew members were dead. The 75mm armor-piercing shell had punched through the frontal plate and created a cone of metal fragments inside the crew compartment. The fragments had shredded everything in their path. Blood painted the interior walls. Body parts lay where physics had thrown them. Hartwell had seen this before, but familiarity didn't make it easier. These were men he knew. Davidson had played poker with him 2 nights ago. The gunner, Sergeant Collins, had showed Hartwell photos of his newborn son. Now they were meat. Hartwell moved to the side of the tank where Davidson's body lay in the snow. The lieutenant's uniform showed no burn marks, no blood, just a small hole in his chest where a metal fragment had pierced his heart. He'd died before the fire started. Hartwell looked back at the broken track. Estimated the time to repair. An hour, maybe 90 minutes. They'd stopped to fix it, made the calculation that Davidson could be saved, spent precious time trying to replace the track links. But Davidson had already been dead. They'd wasted an hour trying to save a corpse. And that hour had cost Lieutenant Parker's crew their lives too. Hartwell moved to Fury. This Sherman showed no obvious damage. No penetration, no fire. But the crew was gone. He found them 50 meters away, scattered in the snow. All five cut down by machine gun fire. They'd bailed out when they saw Avenger burning. They'd run, and the Germans had been waiting. Parker's body lay on its back, eyes staring at the gray sky. 23 years old, from Iowa, engaged. His fiancée sent him a letter every week. Hartwell had delivered the last one just yesterday. Now he'd have to write a different kind of letter. The captain returned it irresolute. His crew watched in silence as he climbed back into the turret. No one asked questions. They'd all seen enough to know. Davidson was dead before the fire, Hartwell said quietly. We could have saved him yesterday if we'd known. But we couldn't know, so we wasted time. And Parker's crew paid the price. That's not on you, Captain, Mac said. You made the call with the information you had. Doesn't matter, Hartwell replied. The math is simple. 1 hour equals 5 lives. That's the equation. That's what command means. In the driver's compartment, Marie, the little girl, sat motionless in Bobby's lap. She stared straight ahead, seeing nothing. Bobby's arms were wrapped around her, keeping her warm, keeping her safe. One small life that depended on them now. Hartwell met Bobby's eyes. The young driver nodded once. The message was clear. We keep moving, we keep fighting, we keep her alive. All right, Hartwell said. We're down to 1 tank. No contact with battalion, no support. We're going to assume we're behind German lines. Our mission is simple. Survive, evade, and get home. Everyone clear? Clear, sir, the crew responded in unison. Bobby, continue northwest. Mac, stay sharp. If we see Germans, we hit first and hit hard. No hesitation, no mercy. Understood? Understood, Mac said. Resolute rolled away from the dead tanks and the dead men. The forest swallowed them again. Snow began to fall, light at first, then heavier. Within minutes, visibility dropped to 50 meters. Perfect cover for an ambush. Hartwell scanned the trees continuously. Every shadow could be a Panzer. Every shape could be an anti-tank gun. The radio remained silent, smashed beyond repair. They were truly alone now. 1 tank, 5 men, 1 small girl, against an entire German offensive. The odds were not good, but odds had never stopped James Hartwell before. He'd survived North Africa when his unit was overrun. He'd survived Sicily when his tank was hit 3 times in 1 day. He'd survived the long push across France through a dozen firefights. He'd survived because he was careful, because he was lucky, and because when the moment came, he made the hard calls and lived with the consequences. Today would test all 3. The snow fell harder. Resolute pushed deeper into the unknown. The forest pressed in from all sides, visibility dropping to 30 meters. The world narrowed to a small sphere of snow and darkness. Bobby drove slowly, his eyes straining to see the trail ahead. In his lap, Marie sat motionless. She hadn't spoken since they'd taken her aboard, hadn't cried, hadn't reacted at all. The trauma had locked her somewhere deep inside herself. Bobby thought of his own sister, 15 years old and locked behind barbed wire in Manzanar. His sister had found small joys in a terrible place. Maybe Marie could too. Maybe survival was enough. Time stretched in the way it did in combat. Minutes felt like hours, every moment pregnant with the possibility of violence. The crew maintained radio silence, communicating through hand signals and throat mic clicks. Max sat at his gun, tracking the turret left and right in slow sweeps. His hands never left the controls. His eyes never left the sight. The gun was loaded with M61 armor, piercing cap ballistic cap. Effective range against heavy armor, 500 meters. Against medium armor, 1,000 meters. He also knew the numbers for German tanks. Panzer IV frontal armor, 80 millimeters. Panther frontal armor, 80 millimeters sloped. Tiger frontal armor, 100 millimeters. Each required different tactics, different approach angles, different hit zones. American tank doctrine emphasized mobility over armor, speed over protection. In practice, it meant American tankers died at a rate that kept Mac awake at night. Average lifespan of a Sherman tank in combat, 6 weeks. Average lifespan of a Sherman crew, 4 weeks. Mac looked at the photo of Margaret, 7 months pregnant, due in February. If he made it home, if the numbers worked in his favor. Big if. Behind Mac, Eddie maintained his position at the loader station. Ready ammunition sat in racks within easy reach. 71 rounds when they'd started this morning. Now 68. 3 rounds expended, no kills to show for it. But Eddie's calculations were different. He counted prayers instead of trajectories. Every moment alive was a gift from God. Every breath was evidence of divine protection. Eddie touched the small wooden cross around his neck. He'd carved it himself from a piece of apple crate. The wood was smooth from constant handling. His mother had taught him that faith was a choice. You could see the world as random chaos, or you could see it as divine order. Either view explained the facts, but only one gave hope. Eddie chose hope. Tommy sat at his bowgun, scanning the forest through his periscope. The .30 caliber Browning was loaded and charged. 750 rounds per minute rate of fire. Effective range, 1,000 meters. But in these trees, effective range was whatever he could see. He thought about his kid brother back in Kentucky, 12 years old now. Tommy had left when the boy was 8. 4 years. Would his brother even recognize him? Would he remember the promise about rabbit hunting? Tommy had made that promise standing on the porch of their farmhouse. "I'll teach you when I get back," he'd said. "We'll get that .22 rifle Pa never lets you touch, and I'll show you how to track and aim and squeeze the trigger gentle-like." His brother had looked up with those big eyes and said, "Promise?" And Tommy had said, "Promise." Movement ahead. Tommy's thumb flicked off the safety. Then the shape resolved. A deer, just a deer picking its way through the snow. It looked at the tank, ears forward, then bounded away into the trees. Tommy breathed out slowly. Everything was a potential threat now. The constant vigilance wore on the nerves. Ground them down like sandpaper on wood, but not yet, not today. In the commander's position, Hartwell maintained his watch. His eyes swept the terrain in a constant pattern. Near to far, left to right, ground to tree line, watch for movement, watch for shapes that didn't belong. The watch in his pocket ticked steadily. Time heals all wounds. His father's words, his father's belief. But Hartwell wasn't sure anymore. Some wounds didn't heal, they just scabbed over. Morrison's screams, Davidson's dead eyes, Parker's scattered crew, the math of command. One decision equals X casualties. Calculate wrong and men died. Calculate right and different men died. There was no calculation that resulted in 0 dead. Not in war. Hartwell thought about Sarah, about the baby due in 3 weeks, about the house in Harrisburg he'd barely lived in, about the life waiting for him if he could just survive a few more months. He looked at Marie sitting in Bobby's lap, 8 years old, orphaned, traumatized. If they died, she died. If they survived, they had to get her to safety. Another mission, another responsibility, another weight. But looking at her, Hartwell felt something shift, a clarity. This was why they fought, not for strategies or politics or grand ideals. For this, for one small girl who deserved a chance to grow up, for Bobby's sister behind barbed wire, for Mac's unborn child, for Eddie's mother praying her rosary, for Tommy's kid brother waiting for rabbit hunting lessons. That was the real mission. That was the only mission that mattered. Hartwell keyed his throat mic. All stations, check in. 1 click from Mac, gunner ready. 2 clicks from Bobby, driver ready. 3 clicks from Eddie, loader ready. 4 clicks from Tommy, bow gunner ready. Good, Hartwell said. We've got no support, no backup. No one's coming to save us. So we save ourselves, we find a way home, and we bring Marie with us. Everyone understand? 5 clicks, 1 from each crew member, affirmative. Then let's move. Bobby, maintain course. Mac, stay sharp. We're going to make it through this. Resolute rolled forward into the storm. The snow covered their tracks within minutes. No evidence they'd passed this way. Just one more ghost in a haunted forest. But ghosts could fight, ghosts could kill, and if the Germans thought the American line had collapsed completely, they were in for a surprise. The forest opened into a shallow valley. A frozen stream cut through the center. Bobby eased Resolute down the bank and onto the ice. The tracks found purchase. The tank crossed without incident. On the far side, Bobby shifted down, the transmission grinding as the Sherman clawed its way up the slope. The engine temperature climbed. The oil pressure held steady. Mechanical harmony. Every system working as designed. For now. But Hartwell knew machines broke. Steel fatigued. Parts wore out. They were running on borrowed time. An immobilized tank was a tomb. The trail leveled out. Through a gap in the trees, Hartwell caught a glimpse of the main road. Empty still. No traffic. No movement. The absence of activity was more disturbing than combat would have been. Then he heard it, the sound that every tanker dreaded, the deep rumble of heavy engines, multiple engines, coming closer. Contact, Hartwell said quietly. Bobby, stop. Mac, traverse right. Everyone silent. Resolute halted. The engine idled. Through the trees, shapes began to emerge. Tanks, big tanks, German tanks. Hartwell counted 1, 2, 3, Panthers, and behind them something bigger, heavier, the profile unmistakable, a Tiger. 4 German tanks rolling up the main road, a full platoon, heading northwest, heading toward whatever remained of the American line. Mac's voice came through the throat mic, quiet, controlled. Sir, I can engage the rear Panther, flank shot, maybe 700 meters, 50-50 chance of penetration. And then the other 3 kill us, Hartwell said. Negative, we let them pass. But sir, that Tiger will kill Americans, I know. But if we engage, we die. And if we die, Marie dies, and Bobby and Eddie and Tommy and you. That's the math. Sometimes the equation says do nothing. The German tanks rumbled past. The crews were buttoned up, hatches closed against the cold. They had no idea an American Sherman sat in the trees a few hundred meters away. No idea how close they'd come to an ambush. The formation rolled on. The sound of engines faded, and Resolute remained hidden, alive, undetected. Mac exhaled slowly. You're right, Captain, the math works. The math always works, Hartwell said, even when we don't like the answer. They waited another 5 minutes, making sure. Then Bobby eased the tank back onto the trail. They continued northwest, angling away from the main road, putting distance between themselves and the German formation. But Hartwell couldn't shake the image. That Tiger, that massive, deadly machine, somewhere ahead it would encounter Americans, and Americans would die. He'd made the right call, he knew that. But the right call didn't feel right. It felt like choosing his own survival over his duty. That was the burden of command, knowing that every decision was wrong in some way, that there were no good choices, only choices you could live with and choices you couldn't. Hartwell could live with this one, barely, but he'd add it to the weight he carried, another choice, another consequence, another ghost to walk beside him. The snow continued to fall. Resolute continued to roll. And somewhere ahead in the frozen Belgian countryside, the war waited for them with open jaws. But they weren't dead yet. And as long as they weren't dead, they could fight, could survive, could make it home. Hartwell wound his father's watch and listened to it tick. Each second a gift, each heartbeat a defiance, each breath an act of rebellion against the forces trying to kill them. Time heals all wounds, the inscription promised. Maybe, someday, if he lived long enough to find out. But first, they had to survive the next hour, then the next day, then the next week. One moment at a time, one decision at a time, one battle at a time. That was all any soldier could do. And James Hartwell was a soldier to his core. The voice on the tape recorder crackles with static, then steadies. The old man's breathing is labored now, each word requiring effort. We drove through that forest for 3 hours, Hartwell says. 3 hours not knowing if the next turn would bring us face to face with a Panzer battalion. Not knowing if Marie would survive the day. Not knowing if any of us would. A pause. The sound of pills rattling in a bottle. Water being swallowed. What happened next? What we found in that barn? That changed everything. Because war isn't just about who you kill. It's about who you don't kill. And sometimes the mercy you show comes back to haunt you in ways you never imagined. The tape hisses. Time shifts forward. December 18th, 0300 hours. The abandoned barn materialized out of the darkness like a ghost ship. Bobby spotted it first, the structure's angular outline barely visible through the falling snow. The roof sagged in the middle, weathered boards gray with age. One wall had partially collapsed, but it offered concealment, and concealment meant survival. Hartwell scanned the perimeter through his periscope. No tracks in the snow, no signs of recent activity. The barn sat alone in a clearing surrounded by dense forest, a forgotten remnant of rural Belgium. Bobby, pull us in, Hartwell ordered. Mac, stay on the gun. Tommy, watch our 6. The Sherman's engine rumbled as Bobby maneuvered through the barn's wide entrance. The structure was just large enough to contain the tank with a few feet of clearance on each side. Frozen hay covered the floor. The smell of old wood and animal musk filled the air. Bobby killed the engine. The sudden silence was deafening. For the first time in 18 hours, they sat without the constant rumble of the Ford GAA-58. The crew's ears rang in the quiet. "We stay here until dawn," Hartwell said. "Cold camp. No fires, no lights. We need rest." In Bobby's lap, Marie stirred. The little girl had been silent since they'd taken her aboard, her blue eyes staring at nothing, her teddy bear clutched tight against her chest. Now she looked up at Bobby's face and spoke for the first time. "Sweef," she whispered. "Thirsty." Bobby looked at Hartwell. "Captain, she needs water." Eddie passed forward his canteen. Bobby held it to Marie's lips. She drank slowly, carefully, then pulled back and returned to her silent vigil. But the single word felt like a victory. She was still there, somewhere inside the trauma, still human, still alive. Hartwell divided the watch into 2-hour shifts. Mac and Tommy would take first watch. Eddie and Bobby second. Hartwell would take third, bringing them to dawn. It wasn't enough rest, but it never was. Sleep in combat was a luxury measured in minutes, not hours. The crew settled into their positions as best they could. The temperature inside the tank dropped rapidly without the engine's heat. They wrapped themselves in wool blankets and tried to find whatever comfort 30 tons of frozen steel could provide. Hartwell remained in the commander's position, his eyes adjusting to the darkness. Through gaps in the barn walls, he could see the forest beyond. Snow continued to fall. The world was monochrome: black trees, white ground, gray sky, a landscape leached of color and hope. He pulled out his father's pocket watch. The hands glowed faintly in the darkness. 03:15 hours. Back in Harrisburg, it would be 9:15 at night. Sarah would be in bed, her pregnant belly making sleep difficult. Was she thinking of him? Did she know he was alive? The mail system had broken down completely. No letters reached the front anymore. No news traveled back. For all Sarah knew, he was already dead. The thought sat heavy in his chest. His child would be born in 3 weeks. Would he be there? Would he meet his son or daughter? Or would Sarah receive a telegram instead? The kind that began with deep regret and ended with grateful nation and left a widow to raise a fatherless child. Hartwell wound the watch and listened to it tick. Each second, another moment survived. Each minute, another small victory against the odds. But the odds had a way of catching up. Sooner or later, the numbers turned against you. Sooner or later, the equation balanced, and someone paid the price. He thought about Morrison, about Davidson, about Parker, about all the men who'd started this war with him and didn't make it this far. How many more would die before it ended? How many more ghosts would walk beside him? A sound cut through his thoughts. Distant at first, then growing louder. The deep rumble of heavy engines. Multiple engines, getting closer. Hartwell's hand dropped to his throat mic. All stations, silent running. "We have contacts approaching." The crew froze. No one moved. No one breathed. Through the gaps in the barn walls, Hartwell could see lights now. Blackout lights, the kind German vehicles used. Coming down the road that ran past the clearing. The first vehicle appeared. A half-track, then another. Then the unmistakable silhouette of a tank. A big tank. The profile was wrong for a Panzer IV. Too large, too heavy. A Tiger. The German formation pulled into the clearing and stopped. The Tiger positioned itself 50 meters from the barn, its massive 88mm gun pointing toward the road. The half-tracks dispersed around it. Soldiers dismounted. Voices carried across the frozen air. German voices, casual, relaxed. They were setting up a rest stop. Hartwell's mind raced. The Tiger crew didn't know Resolute sat hidden in the barn. Didn't know an American Sherman was close enough to hit them with a rock. The Germans were vulnerable. Exposed. If Mac fired now, the Tiger would never know what killed it. "Sir," Mac's voice came through the throat mic, barely a whisper. "I have clear shot. Rear turret, point-blank range. Can't miss." Hartwell watched through the periscope as German soldiers moved around the Tiger. 4 men, no, 5. One was climbing down from the commander's hatch. He dropped to the ground and stretched, his breath visible in the cold air. Young, maybe 30, he wore a tanker's uniform with an officer's insignia. The Tiger commander walked to one of the half-tracks and accepted something from a soldier. A canteen. He drank, then passed it back. Then he reached into his pocket and pulled out a photograph. Even from 50 meters, Hartwell could see the man studying it, could see the softness in his face, the longing. More German voices. Someone was setting up a camp stove. The smell of cooking food drifted across the clearing. The Germans were brewing coffee, making a meal, acting like they had all the time in the world. The Tiger commander tucked the photograph back into his pocket and called out something to his crew. One of them laughed, another responded, the easy banner of men who'd fought together, who trusted each other, who wanted to go home. Men exactly like Hartwell's crew. Captain, Mac whispered. Permission to fire. Hartwell looked at the Tiger, looked at its crew settling in for a rest, looked at the commander who'd been studying a photograph, a wife, a child, someone waiting for him in Germany, praying he'd survive. Negative, Hartwell said. Hold fire. Sir, that Tiger will kill Americans. We can end it now. And alert every German unit within 5 kilometers. We fire, we die. Everyone dies, including Marie. But sir, that's a Tiger. Think how many of our guys it'll kill. I'm thinking if we don't fire, we live. That's the math. The Germans continued their rest stop, oblivious to the death sitting 50 meters away. They heated their food, they drank their coffee, they smoked cigarettes and talked. Normal men doing normal things in an abnormal world. Eddie's voice came through the throat mic. Captain, what if we waited until they sleep? Grenade through the hatch? Hartwell felt his jaw tighten. Are you suggesting we murder sleeping men, Private? I'm suggesting we eliminate a threat, sir. By killing men who can't defend themselves? That's not combat, that's execution. They're the enemy, sir. They're soldiers, Hartwell said. Same as us. We fight them on the battlefield. We don't murder them in their sleep. That's not who we are. Even if it costs American lives, Mac asked. The question hung in the frozen air. Hartwell knew Mac was right to ask it, knew that every minute that Tiger survived, it would kill Americans. Maybe men from their own battalion. Maybe friends. But there were lines that couldn't be crossed. Principles that defined who you were. And once you crossed those lines, once you abandoned those principles, you became something else. You became the thing you were fighting against. Even then, Hartwell said quietly, we're soldiers, not murderers. We hold the line. The crew said nothing, but Hartwell could feel their disagreement, their frustration. They thought he was wrong. Maybe they were right. Maybe mercy was a luxury war couldn't afford. But it was a luxury Hartwell couldn't afford to lose. Because if he lost his humanity, what was he fighting for? The Germans finished their meal. The Tiger commander called out orders. His crew climbed back into their tank. The half-tracks mounted up. Engines rumbled to life. And the formation pulled out of the clearing, heading north, disappearing into the darkness. They never knew how close death had come. The barn fell silent again. The crew remained frozen for another 10 minutes, making sure the Germans were gone. Then slowly they relaxed. Bobby was the first to speak. Captain, I think you made the right call. Hartwell looked at the young driver. Bobby's family was in an internment camp, locked up because of their ethnicity, treated as enemies by their own government. Yet Bobby still believed in doing the right thing. Thank you, Corporal, Hartwell said. Mac, you still think I'm wrong? The gunner was quiet for a moment. Then I think war makes everything complicated, sir. There are no clean answers, but I trust your judgment. Good, because we're going to need trust, all of us, for what's coming. What is coming, sir? Tommy asked. I don't know, Hartwell admitted, but we'll face it together. The night dragged on. The watch shifts changed. The temperature continued to drop. Hartwell took the last watch, his eyes scanning the darkness beyond the barn. The snow had stopped. Stars appeared through breaks in the clouds. The cold was profound, the kind that penetrated steel and flesh and bone. At 0530, the first hint of dawn touched the eastern sky, gray light bleeding into black. Another day survived, another morning they'd live to see. Hartwell climbed down from the commander's position and knelt beside Bobby. The driver was asleep, his arms wrapped around Marie. The little girl was awake, her blue eyes staring at nothing. Bonjour, Hartwell said quietly, his French halting. Comment tu t'appelles? Marie looked at him. For a moment he thought she wouldn't answer. Then, Marie Dubois. Progress. A name, an identity, a small reclamation of self from the trauma. Tu es en sécurité, Marie, Hartwell said. You are safe. We protect you. The girl studied his face. Then she reached out and touched the pocket watch hanging from his belt. Her finger traced the inscription on the back. Mon père, she whispered. My father. He had one like this. Past tense, her father was gone, another casualty, another life erased by war. Hartwell pulled out the watch and showed it to her. My father gave this to me. Now I give it to you. For luck. Marie shook her head. No, you keep. You need luck too. The simple wisdom of a child. Hartwell smiled despite the weight in his chest. You're right. We all need luck. He climbed back into the commander's position and keyed the throat mic. All stations, wake up. We move in 10 minutes. Bobby, warm the engine. Mac, prepare for movement. We're heading northwest to find friendly lines. The crew stirred, shaking off sleep, checking equipment, preparing for another day of survival. Eddie said a quick prayer. Tommy hummed his song. Mac calculated trajectories in his head. Bobby coaxed life back into the frozen engine. And Resolute prepares to roll once more into the unknown. December 19th, 0800 hours. Bobby had managed to jury-rig the radio receiver during the night. Not completely. The transmitter remained smashed, its circuits beyond salvage from Hartwell's decisive blow. But the receiver worked. Barely. He'd bypassed the damaged components, rerouted power through secondary circuits, and coaxed life back into the listening equipment. Through heavy static, fragmentary transmissions came through. Bastogne surrounded, 101 airborne holding. Supplies critical, 4th Armored moving to relieve, enemy resistance heavy. The pieces fell into place. Bastogne was encircled. Patton was sending a relief column. And Resolute sat somewhere between the two, behind German lines. Hartwell studied his map. Bastogne was 15 kilometers northeast of their position. If they could hit German supply lines here, they might slow reinforcements. Give Patton's boys a better chance. But that wasn't their mission. Their mission was to survive, to get back to friendly lines, to get Marie to safety. Except missions changed, circumstances changed, and sometimes you had to choose between what you were ordered to do and what needed to be done. Bobby, Hartwell said, plot a course to this bridge. He pointed to a spot on the map. Are the river, main supply route to Bastogne. If we take it down, we cut German reinforcements. Sir, Max said carefully, that's not our mission. Our mission is to kill Germans and help Americans. That hasn't changed. But sir, we're one tank. We're damaged. We're low on ammunition. We have a civilian. Hartwell looked at their ammunition roster. They'd expended 3 rounds in the skirmish with the Panzer IV and the 2 Stu G3s. That left 68 armor-piercing rounds and 8 high explosive. Not ideal, but workable. Which is why they won't expect us, Hartwell replied. Bobby, how long to reach the bridge? 2 hours if we stay off main roads. Do it. The Sherman rumbled through the forest, following logging trails and farm tracks, staying hidden in the trees. The morning was clear and cold, perfect visibility, which meant perfect visibility for German reconnaissance as well. They moved slowly, carefully, stopping every 15 minutes to listen, watching for movement, watching for signs of enemy activity. The forest was eerily quiet. No birds, no wind, just the crunch of frozen snow under Resolute's tracks. At 0945, they reached a ridge overlooking the bridge. Hartwell climbed out of the turret and crawled to the edge, bringing his binoculars to his eyes. The bridge was a stone structure, old but solid, spanning the Arthur River. On the far side, a German defensive position, 2 Flak 88 guns, 1 Pak 40 anti-tank gun, an infantry platoon, maybe 40 men. Under the bridge, movement. Civilians. Hartwell counted them. 20, 30, 40 Belgian civilians using the bridge's stone arches for shelter. Families, old people, children. His stomach dropped. The bridge was the target. Take it down and German reinforcements would be delayed by hours, maybe a day. Long enough for Patton to reach Bastogne. Long enough to save the 101 Airborne. But taking down the bridge meant collapsing it, and collapsing it meant killing everyone underneath. 40 civilians, maybe more. Hartwell crawled back to Resolute and dropped into the turret. His face must have shown something, because Mac immediately asked, "What's wrong?" Civilians under the bridge, 40 plus, families. The crew was silent. Then Tommy said, "We can warn them, fire a warning shot, and alert the Germans to our presence. We'd be dead in 30 seconds. So what do we do?" Bobby asked. Hartwell looked at each of them, looked at Marie sitting in Bobby's lap, looked at the radio still crackling with reports of Bastogne's desperate situation. The math was simple. 40 civilians versus potentially thousands of American soldiers. Sacrifice the few to save the many. Cold, logical, the kind of calculation that won wars. But could he live with it? Could he give the order that would kill 40 innocent people? Could he look Marie in the eyes afterward, knowing he'd killed people just like her? People who'd done nothing wrong except try to survive? We save them, Hartwell said. We assault the bridge, clear the Germans, evacuate the civilians, then we destroy it. Sir, Max said carefully, that's suicide. Probably. Those flak 88s will shred us. I know. We'll be exposed. No cover, no support. I know. Then why? Because if we kill those civilians, we're no better than the enemy. We become the monsters. And I won't let that happen. The crew exchanged glances. Then Bobby nodded. I'm with you, Captain. Me too, Eddie said. Tommy clicked his throat mic. 4 clicks. Affirmative. Max sighed. Well, if we're going to die, might as well die doing the right thing. I'm in. Hartwell felt something loosen in his chest. Pride. Gratitude. Love for these men who'd follow him into hell. All right, here's the plan. Bobby positions us hull down behind that ridge. Mac, you'll have 1 shot at each flak before they range us. Eddie, load AP, then he, then AP again. Tommy, suppress infantry with cokes. We do this fast and we do it perfect. Questions? None, sir. Then let's go to work. Bobby maneuvered resolute to the ridgeline. The technique was called hull down. The tank's hull remained hidden behind the ridge while the turret crested the top. It minimized their profile, made them harder to hit, but it also limited their mobility. Once committed, they couldn't retreat quickly. Mac traversed the turret, ranging the first flak 88. 800 meters, slight upward angle, wind negligible, temperature corrections factored. Ready, Mac said. Fire. The 75-millimeter gun barked. The AP round streaked downrange. Hartwell watched through his periscope as the shell impacted the flak 88's breech. The gun exploded, ammunition cooked off, the German crew vanished in the fireball. Eddie had already loaded the next round. This time, Mac traversed right, finding the second flak 88. The German crew was scrambling, trying to bring their gun to bear. Mac fired. The HE round hit the gun shield. Shrapnel ripped through the crew. 3 men dropped. The gun slewed sideways, unmanned. Eddie loaded AP. Mac traversed to the PaK-40, but the German anti-tank gun fired first. The round hit the ridge just below Resolute's hull. Dirt and rock exploded upward. The tank rocked. Shrapnel pinged off the armor, but the hull held. Mac fired. His round punched through the PaK-40's gun shield. The AT gun's ammunition exploded. A secondary blast through the barrel 20 feet. Now the German infantry reacted. Hartwell heard the distinctive chatter of MG-42s. Bullets whined overhead. Some found the turret. The sound was like hail on a tin roof. Tommy, suppress that infantry, Hartwell ordered. The bowgun opened up, 750 rounds per minute. Tracers streaked toward the German positions. Wood splintered. Men screamed. The German fire slackened. Hartwell popped smoke grenades. White phosphorus clouds billowed across the bridge approach. Under cover of smoke, he keyed his throat mic. Bobby, advance. Get us across that bridge. The Sherman lurched forward, charging down the slope. They burst through their own smoke cloud, the bridge dead ahead. German infantry scattered. Some ran, some tried to fight. Tommy's bowgun cut them down. Panzerfaust, Max shouted. Hartwell saw him, a German soldier kneeling with the anti-tank weapon on his shoulder, aiming at Resolute's exposed flank. If that shaped charge hit, they were done. Mac couldn't depress the main gun far enough. Tommy's angle was wrong. The German squeezed his trigger. Hartwell grabbed the .50 caliber mounted on the turret, swung it toward the threat, fired. The heavy machine gun thundered. Tracers walked toward the German. The man's head snapped back. He fell. The Panzerfaust round flew wild, impacting the riverbank 50 meters away. Resolute rolled onto the bridge. The stone structure groaned under 30 tons of steel. Bobby didn't slow down. They charged across, the engine screaming, tracks throwing sparks off stone. The German infantry broke. Those who could run did. Those who couldn't threw down their weapons and raised their hands. Bridge secured, Hartwell said. Bobby, position us at the far end. Cover the civilians. The Sherman took position. Hartwell ran a quick status check. The bridge assault had cost them 5 rounds. 2 armor-piercing at the flak 88s, 1 armor-piercing at the PaK-40, 2 high explosive at German positions during the final push. That left 63 armor-piercing and 6 high explosive from their starting load of 71 rounds. Bobby reported damage. Track links cracked from near-miss shrapnel. Engine temperature elevated. Fuel at 1/4 tank. They'd need repairs soon, but the tank was still operational. The civilians were emerging from under the bridge, frightened, confused, but alive. An old man approached Resolute. He was shouting in French. Hartwell caught most of it. "Thank you, Americans. Saved us. Germans would have killed us." "You need to go," Hartwell said in broken French. "Not safe here. Go west. Find American lines." The old man grabbed Hartwell's hand through the open hatch. His grip was strong despite his age. "You are good men. God bless you." More civilians streamed past. Women carrying children, old people supporting each other, a young man with a bandaged leg. All of them alive because Hartwell had chosen mercy over mission. The old man turned back. He pulled something from his pocket, a pocket watch, identical to the one Hartwell carried. He pressed it into the captain's hand. "My father. Great war, you take, twice luck." Before Hartwell could protest, the man was gone, herding civilians toward the forest. Within 5 minutes, the bridge was clear. 43 people saved, 43 lives that wouldn't end today. Hartwell looked at the watch in his hand. The inscription was in French, but the meaning was clear. Time heals. Bring it home. 2 watches now. His father's and this stranger's. 2 wars. 2 generations. 2 men who'd faced death and survived. The weight of legacy pressed down on him. "Sir," Max said quietly, "we need to destroy this bridge." "I know." "Eddie, load he. Mac, target the center span. 3 rounds. Structural collapse." They fired. The bridge shuddered. Stone cracked. Fired again. A section collapsed into the river. Fired a 3rd time. The entire center span gave way. Water rushed through the gap. The bridge was impassable. Mission accomplished. But the ammunition count continued to drop. 63 armor-piercing, 3 high-explosive remaining. 59 rounds left from the 71 they'd started with. But at what cost? Hartwell looked at their ammunition count. 61 rounds remaining. Fuel at half. Engine temperature climbing. They'd accomplished their tactical objective. Delayed German reinforcements. Given Patton a better chance. But they'd also exposed themselves. Every German unit within 10 kilometers knew exactly where they were. "Bobby," Hartwell said, "get us out of here. Northwest. Fast as she'll go." Resolute turned and charged into the forest, leaving the destroyed bridge behind. Behind them, German radio traffic exploded. Units reporting contact, requesting reinforcements, coordinating search patterns. The hunt was on, and Resolute was the prey. December 20th, 1400 hours. They'd been running for 30 hours. The engine was holding together through sheer mechanical will. Bobby coaxed every ounce of performance from the tired machine. They covered 60 kilometers, always moving, never stopping for more than 10 minutes. The radio continued to crackle with updates. 4th Armored encountering heavy resistance at Chaumont. Multiple Shermans lost. Advanced stalling. Bastogne situation critical. Hartwell studied his map. They were 8 kilometers from Bastogne now. Close enough to see the smoke from artillery. Close enough to hear the distant rumble of battle. But between them and the besieged town lay the bulk of 5th Panzer Army. Going forward was suicide. Going back wasn't an option. They were trapped in a shrinking pocket, hunted by an entire German offensive. Then Bobby picked up a new transmission. American voice. Clear. Professional. "This is Cobra King, 4th Armored Division. To any friendly forces. We are 15 kilometers south of Bastogne. Heavy resistance at Chaumont. Need reconnaissance on Assenois approach. Over." Hartwell grabbed the map. Assenois, a small village 3 kilometers from Bastogne. The last obstacle before the relief column could break through. "Bobby, can you patch us through?" The driver worked the radio controls. "I can receive, but I can't transmit, sir. Radio's still half dead." Damn. Hartwell thought fast. If 4th Armored was asking for reconnaissance, they needed intelligence on German positions. Intelligence that Resolute could provide, if they could somehow link up. "Bobby, plot a course to Assenois. We're going to scout it ourselves." "Sir," Max said, "we're down to 59 rounds, half fuel. That engine could seize any minute." "I know, but 4th Armored needs intel and we can provide it. Sometimes you do the mission because no one else can." The crew was silent. Then Eddie said, "Captain's right, we didn't come this far to quit now." "Agreed," Tommy said. Bobby nodded. "Course plotted, sir." Max sighed. "Well, I've survived this long, might as well see it through." Resolute turned northeast, heading toward Assenois, heading toward the sound of guns, heading toward whatever waited in that small Belgian village. They moved carefully, using every scrap of cover. The forest thinned as they approached the village. Through gaps in the trees, Hartwell could see buildings, smoke, movement. Contact front, Hartwell said quietly. Bobby, halt. I'm dismounting for recon. Sir, let me go, Mac protested. Negative, I need you on that gun. Cover me. Hartwell climbed out of the turret and dropped to the frozen ground. The cold hit him immediately. He crawled forward, using trees for cover, until he had a clear view of the village. What he saw made his blood run cold. 3 Panzer IV tanks dug in at the village entrance. 2 PaK-40 AT guns covering the main road. Infantry positions throughout the buildings. Maybe 60 men total. Assenois was a fortress. 4th Armored would have to fight through it building by building. The casualties would be horrific. But that wasn't the worst part. In the village square, Hartwell saw a Tiger tank. Not just any Tiger. He recognized the markings. The commander standing in the hatch. The photograph taped to the turret. It was the same Tiger from the barn, the one Hartwell had spared. The Tiger he'd chosen not to kill when he had the chance. Now that Tiger sat in Assenois, blocking the route to Bastogne, ready to kill Americans, ready to destroy the relief column. Hartwell felt something cold settle in his gut. Not quite regret, not quite guilt, something harder to name. The consequences of mercy, the price of principle. He'd made a choice at the barn. The right choice, he still believed. But right choices had costs, and now American soldiers would pay that cost. Hartwell crawled back to Resolute and climbed into the turret. His face must have shown something because Mac immediately asked, how bad? Bad. 3 Panzer IVs, 2 AT guns, 1 Tiger, the same Tiger from the barn. The crew absorbed this in silence. Then Tommy said quietly, sir, you couldn't have known. Doesn't matter. Men are going to die because I chose mercy over mission. Or men are alive because we're not monsters, Bobby said. You can't have it both ways, Captain. Either we're soldiers with principles or we're murderers with uniforms. You chose right. Did I? Hartwell stared at the map. That Tiger will kill Americans. Maybe a lot of Americans. That's on me. No, sir, Eddie said. That's on the war. You didn't start this. You didn't ask for impossible choices. You just did the best you could with the information you had. That's all any of us can do. Hartwell looked at his crew. These young men who'd followed him through hell, who trusted him with their lives, who believed in him even when he doubted himself. Thank you, he said quietly. Now let's figure out how to take that village. They studied the map, planned approaches, calculated odds. Every scenario ended the same way. Frontal assault meant certain death. The Tiger alone could destroy them from 1,000 meters. The Panzer IVs and AT guns just made it certain. There was no good solution, no clever tactics, no way to win. But they had to try. Because 4th Armored was counting on them, because Bastogne was counting on them, because sometimes you fought knowing you'd lose, just to buy someone else a chance. Sir, Bobby said, radio transmission, Cobra King. Hartwell listened to the fragmentary report. 4th Armored was assembling an assault force. 8 Shermans, 1 company infantry. They'd attack Assenois at dawn. Into that Tiger, into those AT guns, into that fortress. It would be a slaughter. Unless someone warned them, unless someone gave them intelligence, unless someone bought them an advantage. Bobby, Hartwell said, can you boost the radio signal, get a transmission out? Maybe, if I redirect all power to the radio. But we'd lose engine power. We'd be sitting ducks. Do it. We need to warn 4th Armored what they're facing. Bobby worked the controls. Sweat beaded on his forehead despite the cold. Come on, he muttered. Come on. The radio crackled. Static. Then a carrier wave. I think I've got it, sir. Transmit now. Hartwell grabbed the handset. Cobra King, this is Resolute, 707 Tank Battalion. Do you read? Over. Static. Then a voice. Resolute, this is Cobra King. We read you broken and weak. What's your position? Over. 3 kilometers north of your position. I have reconnaissance on Assenois, heavily defended. 3 Panzer IVs, 2 AT guns, 1 Tiger. Recommend flanking approach from east. Over. A pause, then understood. Resolute. Can you provide direct support? Over. Hartwell looked at his crew, looked at Marie sitting in Bobby's lap, looked at the ammunition count, looked at the fuel gauge, looked at everything they'd survived. Affirmative, Cobra King. We'll scout the route and mark positions. Resolute out. He hung up the handset. The crew stared at him. Sir, Max said carefully, we just volunteered to lead an assault on a fortified position. Yes, with 59 rounds and half a tank of fuel. Yes, against a tiger that could kill us from a kilometer away. Yes, Mac nodded slowly. All right then, let's make those 59 rounds count. The sun was setting, painting the snow orangish and red, blood colors. Hartwell wound both pocket watches, his father's and the Belgian stranger's. Both ticked in perfect synchronization. Both promised time would heal. Both promised he'd make it home. But promises made in war had a way of breaking. And Hartwell knew that tomorrow, when 4th Armored assaulted Assiniboia, some promises would be kept and others would be shattered. The only question was which. Resolute sat hidden in the tree line, watching the village, watching the tiger, watching darkness fall over the frozen battlefield. And in the distance, the guns of Bastogne thundered on. December 21st, 0400 hours. Christmas was 4 days away. The thought struck Hartwell as absurd. Somewhere in the world, people were preparing for the holiday, hanging decorations, wrapping presents, singing carols, living in a world where war was something that happened to other people in other places. Here, Christmas meant nothing. Here, survival was measured in hours. The crew had managed 3 hours of sleep in shifts. Not enough, never enough, but it would have to do. At 0600, 4th Armored would begin their assault. Resolute needed to be in position to provide support. Hartwell briefed his crew one last time. We flank east through that creek bed, come up behind the village. We target that tiger first. If we kill it, 4th Armored has a chance. If we don't, they drive into a killing zone. What about the Panzer IVs? Tommy asked. 4th Armored will handle them. Our job is the tiger. One target, one mission. Everyone clear? Clear, sir. Bobby, how's the engine? Holding together with hope and prayer, sir. Literally, Eddie's been praying over it for an hour. Eddie grinned. God's a pretty good mechanic when you ask nice. Despite everything, Hartwell smiled. Let's hope he's paying attention today. At 0530, they moved out. The creek bed was soft ground, partially frozen mud that grabbed at the tracks. Bobby fought the controls, keeping them moving forward. Twice they nearly bogged down. Twice Bobby somehow coaxed the Sherman through. They emerged behind Assiniboia as dawn broke. Through the village, Hartwell could see the tiger. 300 meters, perfect kill shot position. The tiger crew was still buttoned up, hatches closed against the cold. They had no idea death sat behind them. Mac ranged the target. I have the shot, Captain. Rear turret, 280 meters, can't miss. Wait for 4th Armored's attack. When the tigers focus forward, we fire. Understood. They waited. The minutes crawled. The sky lightened from black to gray. Hartwell could see his breath, could hear his heartbeat, could feel the weight of both pocket watches against his chest. Then in the distance, the sound of engines. Multiple engines. 4th Armored was coming. The Tiger's crew heard it too. The commander's hatch popped open. A German officer emerged. He scanned the approach route with binoculars. Shouted orders to his crew. The massive turret began to traverse, the 88mm gun seeking targets. Now, Hartwell said. Mac, fire. The 75mm gun barked. The AP round streaked across 300 meters in less than a second. Hartwell watched it hit the Tiger's rear turret, watched it penetrate, watched the explosion inside. Hatches blew open, smoke poured out. One German tanker escaped. His uniform was on fire. He rolled in the snow trying to extinguish the flames. When he stood, Hartwell recognized him. The Tiger commander. The man with the photograph, the man Hartwell had spared at the barn. For a moment, their eyes met across the battlefield. Recognition flashed in the German's face. He knew this was the American from the barn. Knew he'd been shown mercy and had repaid it by killing Americans. The German officer nodded once. Not surrender, not defiance, acknowledgement, respect. The silent communication between warriors who understood the cost of war. Then he collapsed. Mac, target those Panzer IVs, Hartwell ordered. His voice was steady despite the chaos in his chest. 4th Armored's Shermans were pouring into the village now. The Panzer IVs engaged. Gun flashes lit the dawn. Shells screamed through the air. Tanks exploded. Men died. Mac fired. A Panzer IV brewed up. Fired again. Another Panzer exploded. Resolute's gun was a metronome of death. Load, fire, load, fire. Eddie worked like a machine. Mac aimed like a surgeon. The battle lasted 17 minutes. When it ended, Assiniboia belonged to 4th Armored. The road to Bastogne was open. the siege would be broken. But the cost was brutal. Of 8 American Shermans, 5 were destroyed, 23 men dead, 31 wounded. The math of victory written in blood and twisted steel. Hartwell climbed out of the turret as 4th Armored Infantry swept through the village. A major approached resolute. His name tag read Cassidy. His face was gray with exhaustion. "You resolute?" "Yes, sir." "You saved a lot of lives today, Captain. That tiger would have slaughtered us." "Just doing our job, sir." Cassidy looked at the battered Sherman, at the crew emerging from the tank, at Marie standing beside Bobby, her teddy bear clutched tight. "Your job? Son, you've been behind enemy lines for 6 days. You're a ghost tank. We thought you were dead." "Reports of our death were premature, sir." The major almost smiled. "Glad to hear it. Now let's get you and your crew to Bastogne. You've earned the rest." Resolute limped into Bastogne alongside 4th Armored. The town was a ruin, buildings shattered, streets cratered, but the American flag still flew. The 101 Airborne still held. And now, with the siege broken, supplies could flow in. They'd done it, against all odds, against every logical calculation. They'd survived. As Bobby shut down the engine for what might be the last time, the 4 GAA gave one final shudder and seized. Oil pressure dropped to 0. Temperature spiked into the red. The engine that had carried them through 6 days of hell finally died. "She got us here," Bobby said quietly. "That's all I asked." Hartwell climbed down from the turret and stood beside his tank. His crew joined him. Mac, Bobby, Eddie, Tommy, all alive, all together. And Marie, the small girl who'd lost everything but somehow survived. 101 Airborne medics took Marie to the aid station. She looked back at Resolute's crew one last time, her blue eyes finally showing something other than trauma. Gratitude, hope, life. Then she was gone, swept into the organized chaos of a town under siege. The voiceover from 1994 intrudes quietly. Marie Dubois survived the war. American Red Cross reunited her with her grandfather Paul's sister in Brussels. She grew up, married, moved to Philadelphia in 1958, became a teacher, sent me a Christmas card every year for 40 years. Always the same message. "Thank you for my life. I kept everyone." "We did good," Tommy said. "We did what we had to," Hartwell replied. "That's all." But it was more than that. They'd fought with honor. They'd chosen mercy when vengeance would have been easier. They'd saved civilians when mission dictated sacrifice. They'd held the line not just against the enemy, but against becoming the enemy. That was worth something. That had to be worth something. Major Cassidy approached again. "Captain Hartwell, your tank's done. We're pulling you off the line. You and your crew are getting reassigned." "Where to, sir?" "Wherever the war takes us next. But first, you're getting 72 hours rest. You've earned it." "Thank you, sir." Cassidy paused. "One more thing. The Tiger commander you killed. We found him. He was carrying this." The major handed Hartwell a photograph. A little blonde girl, 5 years old, smiling, standing in front of a house in Hamburg. The Tiger commander's daughter. "His name was Werner Vogel," Cassidy said. "Hauptmann, veteran of North Africa and Russia. Good soldier by all accounts. He died doing his duty. Same as our boys." Hartwell stared at the photograph. The weight of it felt heavier than both pocket watches combined. This was the cost of war. Not the tanks destroyed or the battles won, but the children left fatherless. The wives left widowed. The futures erased. "Can I keep this?" Hartwell asked. "Why would you want to?" "To remember that the enemy bleeds too, that they love their children same as we love ours. That war makes no one noble." Cassidy nodded slowly. "Keep it then. Maybe it'll remind you why we're fighting. So someday no more fathers have to die. No more children have to grow up without them." The major walked away. Hartwell stood alone with the photograph of a German child who would never see her father again. Because James Hartwell had made the right call, had done his duty, had killed the enemy. And that was what broke his heart. The tape recorder clicks off. In the silence, the old man's labored breathing fills the room. "That was part 2, Hartwell says. The weight of command, the cost of mercy, the price of principle. We'd survived. We'd won. We'd broken the siege of Bastogne. But I'd killed a father. And that weight, that guilt, I carry it still." The recorder hisses. Time shifts forward. To the final battle. To the last round. To the truth I've never told anyone. Part 3 awaits. The tape recorder hums in the silence. The old man's voice is weaker now, each word requiring visible effort. But there's an urgency to it, a need to finish the story before time runs out. Part 3, Hartwell says. The part I've never told anyone, not Sarah, not the kids, not even the crew when we reunited over the years. Because some truths are too heavy to share. A long pause, the sound of pills, water, labored breathing. This is about the last promise I made, the one I couldn't keep, the ghost that's walked beside me for 50 years. The recorder crackles. Time shifts forward one final time. December 26th, 0600 hours. Christmas had passed in a blur of artillery fire and cold rations. The 101 Airborne had held out just long enough. 4th Armored had broken through just in time. Bastogne was relieved, but the battle for the Bulge was far from over. German forces still pressed from all sides. The salient remained. The killing continued. Hartwell and his crew had been given 72 hours of rest. They'd slept in actual bunks in a commandeered Belgian farmhouse. They'd eaten hot food. They'd written letters home, though no one knew when or if those letters would be delivered. The mail system was still chaos. Hartwell had written to Sarah. The letter was 4 pages long. He told her he was alive. He told her he was safe, which was a lie, but a necessary one. He told her he thought about her every moment, about the baby due in 2 weeks, about the life they'd build when this was over. He didn't tell her about Morrison burning alive, about Davidson's dead eyes, about Werner Vogel's daughter, about the weight that pressed down heavier each day. Some burdens weren't meant to be shared with the people you loved. Some darkness you carried alone so they wouldn't have to. Now, on the morning of December 26th, the rest was over. Major Cassidy had summoned them to the command post. A new mission waited. The crew assembled outside the farmhouse. Mac looked better after 3 days of sleep. The dark circles under his eyes had faded slightly. Bobby had managed to shave. Eddie had found a Catholic chaplain and spent 2 hours in confession. Tommy hummed his song, "I'll Be Home for Christmas," but the optimism in his voice seemed forced now. They'd all changed. 6 days behind enemy lines did that. 6 days of surviving when survival seemed impossible. They'd seen things that couldn't be unseen, done things that couldn't be undone, and the war had marked them in ways that would never fully heal. Hartwell led them to the command post, a stone building that had once been a town hall. Inside, maps covered every wall. Officers huddled over radio sets, the organized chaos of war at its most intense. Major Cassidy looked up as they entered. His face was drawn. He'd aged 10 years in 3 days. "Captain Hartwell, your crew rested?" "As much as possible, sir." "Good, because I've got a mission that needs your particular brand of crazy." Cassidy gestured to a map. 4th Armored is preparing a major push north. Final breakout from the Bulge. We're assembling an assault force, 8 Shermans, 1 company of armored infantry. Objective is the village of Assinois. "We already took Assinois, sir," Max said. "You took the southern approach. We need the northern route secured. German armor is massing there. We've identified at least 4 Panzer IVs and supporting infantry. If we don't clear them out, they'll hit our flank during the main push." Hartwell studied the map. The northern approach to Assinois was a narrow valley, perfect ambush territory. Whoever attacked through there would take heavy casualties. "What's our support?" "Sir," Hartwell asked. "Artillery prep at 0830, air cover if the weather holds. But you'll be the tip of the spear. First in, first contact." "Understood. What about our tank?" "Resolute's engine is seized. But we've got you a replacement, a brand new M4A3, just arrived from depot. She's yours." Hartwell felt something twist in his chest. Resolute had brought them through 6 days of hell. The old girl had earned her rest, but saying goodbye felt like losing a friend. "Does she have a name?" Tommy asked. "Not yet. That's your job." The crew exchanged glances. Then Bobby said quietly, "Resolute 2, in honor of the one that got us here." Cassidy nodded. "Resolute 2 it is. You mount up at 0700. Briefing for all commanders at 0630. Questions?" "Just one, sir," Hartwell said. "What are our odds?" The major looked at him for a long moment. "Then honestly, 50-50, but you've beaten worse odds before." "Yes, sir, we have." The briefing was short and brutal. 8 tank commanders crowded around the map. Hartwell recognized some of them. Lieutenant Reynolds from Chicago, Lieutenant Martin from Alabama, Lieutenant Baker from Oregon. Young men, most of them, younger than Hartwell by 5 or 10 years. Some of them looked at him with something like awe. The ghost tank captain. the man who'd survived behind enemy lines. Hartwell wanted to tell them the truth, that survival was 90% luck and 10% not making stupid mistakes, that every day alive was borrowed time, that the odds always caught up eventually. But they didn't need to hear that. They needed to believe they'd make it home. Belief was armor. Sometimes it was the only armor that mattered. The plan was simple. Advance in column up the valley, engage German armor, overwhelm them with numbers and firepower, secure the northern approach. 8 Shermans against 4 Panzers. The math favored the Americans. But math didn't account for terrain or tactics or the simple fact that German tanks could kill Shermans from twice the range Americans could return fire. Hartwell studied the map and saw the ambush points, saw where the Germans would position, saw how they'd use the narrow valley to negate American numbers, saw the killing ground as clearly as if it were already painted in blood. "Sir," Hartwell said, "request permission to speak freely." "Granted," Cassidy replied. "This is going to be a bloodbath. That valley is a natural kill zone. We'd be better off with a flanking maneuver. Send half the force around the ridgeline, come at them from 2 directions. We don't have time for fancy maneuvers, Captain. We need that approach secured in 3 hours. Speed is essential." "Speed is useless if we're all dead, sir." The room went silent. Other tank commanders looked at Hartwell with a mixture of respect and concern. No one challenged majors, not openly, not like this. Cassidy's jaw tightened. "Your objection is noted, Captain, but the plan stands. We attack at 0800 hours. Straight up that valley. Any other questions?" No one spoke. Dismissed. The commanders filed out. Hartwell remained. "Sir, permission to request point position." Cassidy looked at him. "You want to lead the attack?" "Yes, sir. If this is going to be a bloodbath, better my crew than someone else's. We've got experience. We know how to survive." The major studied him for a long moment. "You've got a death wish, Captain?" "No, sir. I've got a crew I care about. If someone has to go first, I want it to be us. We're good at staying alive." Cassidy nodded slowly. "Point position is yours. But Captain, if the plan is as bad as you think, don't be a hero. If you need to pull back, you pull back. I'm not in the business of wasting good men on bad tactics." "Understood, sir." Hartwell saluted and left. Outside, his crew was waiting by Resolute 2. The new Sherman looked pristine compared to their old tank. Fresh paint, no dents, no scars. It hadn't earned its history yet. "We're on point," Hartwell announced. "First tank in." "Of course we are," Max said without surprise. "Why would we get the easy job?" "Because we're too stupid to die," Tommy said, grinning. "Right, Captain?" Hartwell looked at the young bowgunner. 20 years old, a lifetime of experiences crammed into 6 days. Still optimistic, still believing they'd make it home. "Right," Hartwell said. "Too stupid to die." The crew climbed into Resolute 2. The interior smelled wrong. Too clean, too new. No history, no ghosts. Just cold steel, waiting to be christened in fire. They spent an hour familiarizing themselves with the new tank. The gun mechanisms were slightly different. The radio actually worked. The engine purred like it had never known hardship. Everything functioned exactly as designed. Hartwell found himself missing Resolute. The old tank's quirks. The way Bobby had to coax the transmission. The way Mac compensated for a slightly bent gun barrel. The accumulated wisdom of survival that lived in every worn surface. This new tank was an unknown. They'd have to learn her language, earn her trust, hope she'd bring them home the way Resolute had. At 0745, the column formed up. 8 Shermans in line, Resolute 2 at point. Behind them, half-tracks full of infantry. Behind those, support vehicles. A miniature army preparing to push through a valley that wanted to kill them. Hartwell looked at his crew one last time before they buttoned up. Mac at the gun, his hands steady. Eddie at the loader position, rosary wrapped around his wrist. Bobby in the driver's seat, his photo of his sister tucked behind the instrument panel. Tommy at the bow gun, humming his song. "Listen up," Hartwell said. "This is going to be bad, we all know it. But we've been through bad before. We survived because we trusted each other, because we didn't panic, because we did our jobs. That doesn't change today." He paused, making eye contact with each of them. "I made you all a promise 6 days ago. All 5 of us go home. I intend to keep that promise. So you stay sharp, you follow orders, and you don't do anything stupid. Understood?" "Yes, sir," they replied in unison. "Good. Bobby, start her up. Let's see what Resolute 2 can do." The engine roared to life. Smooth, powerful, ready. The column began to move. At 800 hours, they entered the valley. The artillery had done its work. The hillsides were pocked with craters. Trees had been snapped like matchsticks. Smoke drifted across the narrow valley floor. But Hartwell knew artillery didn't win battles. It just announced your arrival. The German armor would be dug in. Waiting. Patient. They'd let the American column advance deep into the kill zone before opening fire. Standard tactics, textbook ambush. Hartwell's job was to spring that ambush. Draw the first fire, survive long enough for the other Shermans to maneuver. He was the bait. Contact front, Hartwell said quietly as his periscope picked up movement. Panzer IV, hold down position. Range 800 meters. Before Mac could respond, the Panzer fired. The round screamed overhead, missing by meters. Bobby instinctively swerved left. The column behind them scattered, Shermans peeling off to find cover. Mac, return fire, Hartwell ordered. He round. Suppress him. Mac fired. The high explosive shell impacted near the Panzer's position. Dirt and smoke erupted. The German tank remained hidden, unharmed. Then 3 more Panzers opened fire. The valley erupted. Shells crossed the space between the armies. The lead Sherman behind Resolute 2, Lieutenant Reynolds' tank, took a direct hit. The 75-millimeter round punched through the frontal armor. The Sherman exploded from the inside, ammunition cooking off. The turret flew 15 feet into the air. No survivors. Bobby, evasive maneuvers, Hartwell shouted. Don't give them a stationary target. The Sherman zigzagged across the valley floor. Shells impacted where they'd been seconds before. The German gunners were good, experienced. They knew how to lead a moving target. Lieutenant Martin's Sherman fired, hitting one of the Panzers. The German tank's track broke. It slewed sideways, immobilized but still dangerous. Then Lieutenant Baker's Sherman took a hit. The round penetrated the side armor. Fire erupted from the hatches. 3 crew members bailed out. German machine gun fire cut them down before they could find cover. We're getting slaughtered, Tommy said, his voice tight. Just like you said, Captain. Stay focused, Hartwell snapped. Mac, target that immobilized Panzer. Take him out of the fight. Mac fired. The armor-piercing round found its mark. The Panzer's turret erupted. One less threat. But 2 Panzers remained, and they were chewing through American armor like it was paper. Hartwell made a decision. Bobby, hard left. Get us to that ridge line. We're flanking. Sir, that's off the attack route, Bobby protested. I know. Do it anyway. Resolute 2 broke from the column and charged toward the ridge. The maneuver Hartwell had suggested in the briefing. The one Cassidy had dismissed. Now it was their only chance. Behind them, the valley had become a slaughterhouse. 4 Shermans remained in the fight. 4 out of 8, and the German Panzers still held the high ground. Resolute 2 clawed up the ridge, the tracks fighting for purchase on loose rock. They crested the top and found themselves looking down at the German positions from behind. 2 Panzers, both focused on the valley below, both exposed. Mac, Hartwell said. Left Panzer first, then right. Make them count. Mac fired. The range was less than 300 meters. A gift for a gunner of his caliber. The first Panzer exploded. The crew never knew what hit them. The second Panzer tried to traverse. Too slow, Mac was faster. His second shot penetrated the rear armor. The Panzer shuddered and died. The valley fell silent. The ambush was broken. The German armor was destroyed. The northern approach was secure, but the cost was staggering. Of 8 Shermans, only 4 survived. 23 men dead, 31 wounded, the exact casualty numbers Cassidy had reported after taking southern Assiniboia. Hartwell climbed out of the turret and stood on Resolute 2's hull. He could see the burning wrecks in the valley below, could see the bodies scattered across the snow, could see the price of speed over strategy. Bobby brought the Sherman back down to the valley floor. The surviving tanks regrouped. Lieutenant Kowalski from the 4th tank approached on foot. His face was pale. His hands shook. We did it, he said. We took the position. Yes, Hartwell replied, we did. But his voice was hollow, because taking the position didn't bring back the dead, didn't heal the wounded, didn't erase the fact that better tactics could have saved lives. Command wanted speed. They got it. And 23 men paid the price. Major Cassidy arrived 30 minutes later with the infantry. He surveyed the battlefield, his face unreadable. Then he approached Hartwell. You were right, Cassidy said quietly. This was a bloodbath. I should have listened to you. Yes, sir, you should have. The words hung between them. Not insubordination, just truth. raw and ugly. For what it's worth, Cassidy continued, your flanking maneuver saved the day. If you hadn't broken from the column, we'd have lost everyone. Doesn't bring them back, sir. No, it doesn't. But it kept some of them alive. That's all we can do. Keep some of them alive. Hartwell said nothing. There was nothing to say. The major was right, but being right didn't make it feel any better. The column continued north, pushing deeper into the bulge. Resolute 2 rolled with them, no longer at point. Cassidy had that much sense, at least. Let someone else lead for a while. They advanced for 3 hours without contact. The German forces seemed to be withdrawing, pulling back toward their own borders. The offensive was collapsing. The bulge was being flattened. Victory was close. Everyone could feel it. That's when Hartwell's luck ran out. December 26th, 1400 hours. The village had no name on Hartwell's map, just a cluster of buildings along a crossroads. Intel reported it was undefended, a simple waypoint on the road to final victory. Intel was wrong. The column rolled into the village without resistance. Then the world exploded. Panzerfaust rockets streaked from windows, anti-tank fire from prepared positions, machine gun nests opening up from every corner. The Germans had turned the village into a fortress, and the Americans had walked right into it. Resolute 2 was in the middle of the column, trapped. No room to maneuver. Sherman's ahead and behind, infantry half-tracks all around, perfect chaos. Contact all sides, Hartwell shouted into the radio. Infantry, dismount and clear buildings. Armor, suppress at positions. The half-tracks emptied, American infantry charged into the buildings, rifles blazing. The Germans fought back with everything they had. The village became a close-quarters nightmare. A Panzerfaust team appeared in a second-story window. Hartwell saw them lining up the shot, saw the shaped-charged warhead pointed directly at Resolute 2's side armor. Tommy, 12 o'clock high, Hartwell screamed. Tommy swung the bowgun up, fired. The .30 caliber rounds stitched across the window, but the German had already fired. The Panzerfaust rocket streaked across 50 meters in less than a second. It hit Resolute 2's frontal glacis plate. The shaped charge detonated. The copper jet penetrated the armor. The explosion entered the crew compartment. Tommy Reed was directly in the blast path. The force lifted him, threw him back, slammed him against the hull. He fell into the driver's compartment, his body broken. Bobby screamed. Eddie screamed. Mac cursed and fired the main gun at the building, blowing it apart. Hartwell dropped down into the crew compartment. Tommy lay motionless. Blood everywhere. Too much blood. The bowgunner's position was a mess of metal and flesh. Hartwell grabbed Tommy's jacket. The young man's eyes were open, unfocused, pain-filled. Captain, Tommy whispered. His voice was wet, bubbling. Lung damage, fatal lung damage. I'm here, son. I'm here. Tell my brother. Tommy coughed. Blood came with the words. Tell him I'm sorry. Couldn't teach him to hunt. You're going to tell him yourself, Hartwell lied. You're going to be fine. Tommy smiled, blood on his teeth. Still optimistic, even dying. Don't lie, Captain, I know. His hand fumbled in his breast pocket, pulled out the photograph. 2 boys in front of a farmhouse. The older one's arm around the younger, both grinning. Give this to him, Tommy said. Tell him I loved him. Hartwell took the photo. His hand was shaking. I promise. You promised we'd all go home, Tommy whispered. His eyes were fading. You promised. I know. I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. Tommy's hand gripped Hartwell's. The grip weakened. His breathing slowed, stopped. Private Thomas Reed died at 14:08 hours on December 26, 1944. He was 20 years old. He'd survived North Africa, Sicily, France, and 6 days behind enemy lines. He'd survived Tiger tanks and Panther ambushes and artillery barrages. He died 2 miles from where the bulge would finally break. 2 miles from the victory he'd fought so hard to achieve. 2 miles from going home. The fighting continued around them, but inside Resolute 2, time stopped. The crew stared at Tommy's body. No one spoke. No one moved. They'd lost friends before, lost other crews, but this was different. Tommy was one of them. Family. Brother. The heart of their crew. And now he was gone. We need to keep fighting, Mac said quietly. Tommy would want us to keep fighting. Hartwell looked at Mac, at Eddie, at Bobby. 3 faces marked by shock and grief and rage. 3 men who'd just lost their brother. Yes, Hartwell said. He would. They pulled Tommy's body out of the bow gun position, laid him as gently as they could in the back of the tank. Eddie said a prayer. Bobby wept silently. Mac's face was stone. Then they got back to work, because that's what soldiers did. They grieved later. They mourned later. In the moment they fought, Hartwell climbed back into the commander's position. The village battle was still raging. American infantry was clearing buildings room by room. German resistance was collapsing. Victory was inevitable. But victory felt hollow now. The battle ended at 1500 hours. The village was secured. German forces retreated north. The road was open. The advance would continue. 28 Americans had died taking the nameless village. Tommy Reed was number 29. Major Cassidy found Hartwell sitting beside Resolute 2, Tommy's photograph in his hands. The major said nothing for a long moment. Then, "I'm sorry, Captain, I heard about Reed." "He was a good soldier," Hartwell said. His voice sounded dead. 20 years old, had a kid brother back in Kentucky, promised to teach him to hunt rabbits. "War takes the best of us," Cassidy said. "Always has, always will. That's supposed to make it better?" "No, nothing makes it better, but we keep fighting anyway. Because if we don't, their deaths mean nothing." Hartwell looked at the major. "Do they mean something now? All these dead boys? Does their sacrifice actually matter? Or are we just feeding them into a meat grinder and calling it noble?" Cassidy sat down beside him. "I don't know," he admitted. "Some days I think this war is necessary, that we're fighting for something that matters. Other days I think we're all just murderers with flags. The only difference between us and them is which flag we salute." "Then why do we keep doing it?" "Because someone has to. Because if good men don't fight, evil men win." It's not a satisfying answer, but it's the only one I've got. Hartwell said nothing. He looked at Tommy's photograph. 2 boys in front of a farmhouse. One of them was dead now. The other would grow up without his brother, without the rabbit hunting lessons, without the promise kept. "I told him we'd all go home," Hartwell said. "I promised." "You kept 3 of us alive," Mac said, appearing from the tank. "That's better than most commanders manage. That's worth something." "Is it?" Hartwell asked. "Because right now it feels like I failed." "You didn't fail," Bobby said, joining them. "We're alive because of you. Tommy's dead because war is random and cruel, not because you made a mistake." Eddie was the last to emerge. He held his rosary. His eyes were red. "Tommy's in God's hands now, Captain. Our job is to honor his sacrifice by finishing this, by going home, by living the lives he can't." Hartwell looked at his remaining crew. 3 men who'd followed him through hell, who'd trusted him with their lives, who'd lost their brother but still believed in the mission. "All right," he said quietly. "We finished this. For Tommy." They loaded Tommy's body into an ambulance with the other dead. The crew saluted as it drove away. Hartwell kept the photograph. He'd made a promise. He'd keep it. Even if it took 50 years, the column moved out. Resolute 2 rolled north with 4 crew instead of 5. The bow gun position stayed empty. No one volunteered to fill it. It felt like disrespecting Tommy's memory. Over the next 3 weeks, the Battle of the Bulge ground to its conclusion. German forces retreated. American forces advanced. The salient was flattened. The offensive that was supposed to turn the tide of war became Germany's last gasp. By January 12, 1945, the battle was over. 90,000 German casualties, 20,000 Americans killed, 50,000 wounded. The bloodiest battle in American military history. Hartwell, Mac, Bobby, and Eddie survived it all. They were reassigned to new units, given new missions, sent to new battlefields. They reached Berlin in May, saw the war end, came home. But they never spoke about Bastogne, never spoke about the 6 days behind enemy lines, never spoke about Tommy Reed and the promise that couldn't be kept. Some stories were too painful to tell. Some ghosts walked too close to share. Until now. 1994, Harrisburg, Pennsylvania. The tape recorder clicks off. The old man sits in silence, tears streaming down his weathered face. The cancer has taken everything except the memories. The memories never fade. A knock on the door. "Come in," Hartwell says. The door opens. 3 old men enter. Mac O'Brien, 74 years old, gray and bent but alive. Bobby Chen, 71, still sharp-eyed and precise. Eddie Martinez, 69, priest collar around his neck. The reunion. "We came to say goodbye," Bobby says quietly, like we said we would. Hartwell tries to stand. They wave him down. Sit with him. 3 old soldiers surrounding their captain one last time. "I recorded it," Hartwell says. "All of it. Everything we never talked about." "Good," Mac says. "People should know, should remember." I told them about Tommy, Hartwell continues, about the promise I couldn't keep. You kept 3 of us alive, Eddie says. That's 3 promises kept. That's 3 families, 3 lives, 3 futures that exist because of you. Tommy would call that a win. I went to Kentucky in '46, Hartwell says. Met Tommy's brother, taught him to hunt, gave him the photograph, told him Tommy was a hero. You kept your promise then, Bobby says. Maybe not the way you wanted, but you kept it. Hartwell pulls out 2 pocket watches, his father's and Paul's, both still ticking after 50 years. Time heals all wounds, they promised. Did it heal, Mac asks. No, Hartwell admits. Some wounds don't heal. You just learn to carry them. Then we carry them together, Eddie says. That's what brothers do. Mac's daughter approaches. She's holding a package. Her name is Catherine, named after Lieutenant Morrison's fiancée. Born in February 1945, 3 months after Margaret received word that Mac had survived Bastogne. My father wanted me to give you this, Catherine says. She hands it to Hartwell. He opens it. Inside, a Sherman tank model, carefully painted, Resolute stenciled on the side, and 5 small figures in the commander's hatch. Made it myself, Mac says. All 5 of us, the way we should be remembered. Together. Hartwell's tears come harder now. Thank you, all of you, for everything. Eddie pulls out his rosary, the same one he carried through the war. Let me say a prayer. For Tommy, for all of us. They bow their heads, 4 old soldiers in a quiet room, praying for the brother who didn't make it home, praying for the future they'd built from his sacrifice, praying for the mercy time had never quite delivered. When the prayer ends, they sit in comfortable silence. 50 years of shared history needing no words, the weight of memory distributed across 4 old backs instead of one. My grandson asked me to record this, Hartwell says finally, so he'd know the truth about war, about command, about the weight of promises. Sarah gave me 3 children, James Jr., born January 10th, 1945, 3 weeks after I made it to Bastogne, then Elizabeth in '47, then Michael in '49. Sarah passed in '89. Cancer. But she gave me 44 good years and 3 beautiful kids. That's more than most soldiers get. What did you tell him? Bobby asks. Your grandson, I mean. That war makes everyone compromise. That command means choosing who lives and who dies. That promises made in combat are promises with ghosts. And that survival isn't victory, it's just survival. The victory is what you do after. And what did we do after? Mac asks. Hartwell looks at each of them. Mac came home and raised a daughter, worked at Ford for 40 years, built the cars that built America. Bobby went to NASA, helped put men on the moon, proved that America was bigger than the camps that held his family. Eddie became a priest, spent 50 years giving hope to people who'd lost everything. We lived, Hartwell says simply. We loved. We built families and futures. We turned our survival into meaning. That's Tommy's legacy. That's what his sacrifice bought. Then it was worth it, Eddie says, not the dying, but the living that came after. The afternoon fades into evening. The old soldiers share stories. Remember the good parts, the brotherhood, the small victories, the moments of beauty in a landscape of horror. They don't speak about the killing, about the fear, about the nightmares that never quite stopped. Those things live in the silence between words, in the spaces where memory meets mercy. As they prepare to leave, Hartwell calls them back one more time. Thank you, he says, for being my crew, for trusting me, for surviving. You made an old promise mean something. That's more than most men get. You were the best commander we could have asked for, Mac replies. You brought us home. That's all that mattered. They embrace. 4 old men who'd been 5 young men once, who'd seen hell and walked back out, who'd kept faith with each other across 50 years and 1,000 miles. When they're gone, Hartwell sits alone with the tape recorder. He picks it up one final time. This is Captain James Hartwell, 707 Tank Battalion, recording my final entry. December 16th, 1994, 50 years after the bulge. If you're listening to this, grandson, then I'm gone. The cancer won, or the years caught up. Either way, I'm with Tommy now, and Morrison and Davidson, and all the ghosts I've carried. Here's what I want you to know. War is hell. Command is burden. Promises made in combat are promises with pain. But brotherhood is real. Sacrifice means something. And the life you build after matters more than the death you survived. I kept 3 men alive. I lost 1. For 50 years, I've wondered if that was enough, if I did right, if the choices I made were the ones a better man would have made. I still don't know. Maybe there's no answer. Maybe command means living with questions that have no resolution. Maybe that's the real burden, not the dead, but the uncertainty about whether their deaths meant something. But I know this. Mac and Bobby and Eddie lived full lives. They loved, they built, they mattered. And Tommy's sacrifice made that possible. That has to count for something. That has to be enough. Time heals all wounds, my father's watch promised. It lied. Time doesn't heal. It just gives you perspective. And perspective lets you see that survival isn't the victory. Living well is the victory, turning pain into purpose, turning loss into legacy. We did that, the four of us. We turned Tommy's death into 50 years of meaning. We turned 6 days in hell into lifetimes of light. That's what soldiers do. They fight, they survive. And if they're lucky, they live long enough to understand why. I understand now. Finally, after 50 years, I understand. The watch inscription wasn't a promise. It was a prayer. And prayers aren't always answered the way you hope. But sometimes, if you wait long enough, you see that they were answered all along. Just not in the way you expected. Time doesn't heal wounds, but it gives you the chance to heal yourself. And brotherhood gives you the strength to do it. That's enough. That has to be enough. This is Captain James Hartwell, signing off. To all those who didn't make it home, to Tommy and Morrison and Werner Vogel and all the ghosts, may you finally rest. And to those who did make it home, thank you for making the survival worth it. Thank you for turning pain into purpose. Thank you for being my brothers. The watch still ticks, both of them, right up until the end. Time heals all wounds, even the ones that never quite close, even the ones that walk beside you for 50 years, even the ones that feel like they'll never stop bleeding. Time heals, eventually, if you let it, if you live long enough, if you keep faith with the fallen by honoring them with your living. We did that, the best we could, with the time we had, with the wounds we carried, with the brotherhood that held us together. That's all any soldier can do. Fight with honor, survive with purpose, live with meaning, and pass the story on so the next generation understands the cost. I pray they understand. I pray they never have to pay it themselves. But if they do, if war calls them the way it called us, then I pray they find brothers like I found. Because brotherhood is the only thing that makes war survivable, the only thing that makes the burden bearable, the only thing that turns survival into victory. To my brothers, to my crew, to Mac and Bobby and Eddie, thank you for everything, for 50 years of friendship, for keeping the faith, for making the promise mean something even when I couldn't keep it. And to Tommy, wherever you are, I kept my word. I taught your brother to hunt. I made sure he knew you loved him. I carried your memory for 50 years, and when I close my eyes for the last time, I'll tell you in person that you were the best of us, the heart of us, the one we never forgot. See you on the other side, kid. Save me a seat. This is Captain James Hartwell, over and out. The tape recorder clicks off. The old man closes his eyes. Both pocket watches tick on his chest, in perfect synchronization, counting down the last moments. Outside, snow begins to fall, the same snow that fell 50 years ago in a frozen Belgian forest, the same snow that covered the dead and comforted the living, the same snow that marked the moment 5 men became brothers. And the watches tick, and time moves forward, and the story ends the way all stories end, with silence, with memory, with the hope that it mattered, that they mattered, that the sacrifice meant something, that the brotherhood endured. It did, it does, it always will, for as long as someone remembers, for as long as the watches tick, for as long as brothers honor brothers. The snow falls, the watches tick, and Captain James Hartwell, veteran of North Africa and Sicily and the Battle of the Bulge, hero of Bastonia, keeper of promises, finally rests. His war is over. His burden is lifted. His brothers are waiting. Time healed after all, in its own way, in its own time, with mercy that came slowly but surely. The wounds close, the ghosts rest, the watches tick one final time. And then silence, peace, home at last.